All right. Happy New Year, everyone. Demetrius is here, and we've got Jesse Engel returning. Thank you for coming back, Jesse. How's it going?
It's going pretty good. How about yourself?
I'm doing good. Okay, I was waiting to tell you this until we turned it on. So last night I had a guy come over to play some pool last night. We just played New Year's. I mean, once you've seen a few dozen New Year's, they kind of lose the anyway,
Yeah.
so we're playing pool and I looked up at him, I said, "We're gonna keep playing this session until all the way until next year." And he says, "Oh, ha ha ha," because New Year's. I'm like, "No, no, until 2026." I'm like, "No, we're gonna go." I meant. So it was kind of like a pump fake where he thought I was
Yeah.
making the classic New Year's joke, but no, I'm like, we're playing straight through.
Take the dad joke to the next level.
It's right. It's like meta. Okay. Anyway, so
Well, if you
um,
if we get this edited, we might actually be the first pool podcast of 2025.
well,
You
this
never
is
know.
something. This is actually something that it's funny, man. I just can't believe every day I do one of these things. I'm always in disbelief that I'm doing it because it's just not really who I like. I'm not a big podcast guy, really.
Yeah.
And so I was thinking about it the other day because I got to plug my boot camp. So real quick, MN Pool Boot Camp, Minnesota Pool Boot Camp. It's mnpoolbootcamp.com. I do 3-day pool sessions for people that are really passionate about this game and serious about getting to the next level. Tonight, we're going to be talking about why people plateau, among other things. And this is a very subject I'm very passionate about because what I do is I really do try to help people that have been stuck for a while get through that and get to the next level. And so we'll have some fun conversation. But one thing about timing, as far as information goes, and or as far as scheduling goes. So as far as information, the reason I was thinking about podcasting is, man, and you were mentioning other podcasts or other stuff. There is so much, like ever since COVID and people got cameras in their basements and everybody got a camera, it just feels like there's a million YouTube channels and a million pool podcasts and a million people trying to demonstrate shots and reels and look at how you make this shot and here's how you do. It's like there is just this, it's not even a saturation. It's an obnoxious amount of information, and it's good. It's like I appreciate it, and I appreciate the people that care about it and are doing a good job because they're passionate about sharing this game and helping people. But there's just so much out there that it's almost I don't know, man. It's almost a little bit it doesn't, like, repulsive is too strong of a word, but it's kind of like pushes me away. What am I do? Help me out here. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I mean, obviously I don't like it's not like I hop on YouTube every day and like search, pool content, but I will say like even seeing different like random shorts or, I mean, I have TikTok, so stuff will pop up there and I'm like the amount of people that like post something, even if it's not meant to be like, super high level training, it does get a little bit too much at times. It's like, all right, we get it, But then I mean, maybe to the average person, that's kind of cool. I just like I don't want to see a little pool clip pop up anywhere. So I'm like,
Yeah. So
I
here's,
want to
you know what
watch
it
pool. I want
is.
to watch real pool.
Yeah, and I think that this isn't where I wanted to go with this. I'm going to go there. But what my main point was that um, I never thought I would. So I didn't never wanted to be. I never taught anybody anything for a lot of years. I just played pool, and I was always like, there's a game that gets played by teachers or by not instructors or teachers, like but people playing a coaching role. Like everybody wants to be the expert, and the reason I think it's never been for me. I always just wanted to play and lead by example and just demonstrate,
Yeah,
because the one thing I never liked was the guy at leagues that can't actually play and he can't run the balls out. But he has something to say about everybody else's game. And he can say why that girl should have played safety. And he can explain why they should have taken solids. And he can explain why they should have shot the four first, or why they should, how that stroke is a little, off kilter with the wrist. But then they get to the table and they're just mediocre. And it always
yeah,
bothered me because then I'm like, okay, I have a couple points about this. It's like, one, if you're so smart, why can't you run the balls out? And number two, are you doing? And here's a bigger point: are you doing this for you or for them? Like some coaching, man, some coaching where people see somebody at a pool hall and they just genuinely see somebody struggle. Like if I was playing and I saw somebody setting up a shot and shooting it again and again and again and again, it's really struggling to get the shot to work, and I knew what they were doing wrong and I could see it. If I saw him struggling with this for 10 minutes, I mean, I might be tempted to be like, hey, you want me to show you a quick fix on that? Because it's just hard to watch somebody beat their head in the wall. But almost never is that the case. it seems like the vast majority of times that people go out and try to like help somebody else with their game, it's not about actually seeing the other person struggle and feeling compassion and a lot of times it's like they just like to wear the role of the expert hat where it's like they want the attention and centrality and importance and have somebody look up to them as, oh, you're the guy that knows. And they just like playing the role of the expert. You know what I'm talking about?
I do, yeah. I think everybody's probably guilty of that to some extent at times in their life, right? Whether it be for pool or something else. Like we all want to feel like we're super knowledgeable or like we know something or we're better at something than other people. But yeah, I know what you're saying, like how it's quite annoying when you see
Yeah.
people do it and you absolutely know it's like yes, they're trying to like they try to like justify like they're coming from a good place, but you just kind of know it's like, all right, this is too much, man. Like you can't even execute this shot. You're talking about it like you're an expert. So
Well, it's tough for me. So that's why the funny part is that as a coach now and as a pool podcaster, it's like now I put on my expert cap where and I just it's like I don't even want to wear the damn thing. And so why this was supposed to be lighthearted, and here it is, and it got existential on me. But like, I'm like, why am I doing these? And I always ask that because I just don't want to be that guy. And in a sea of people wanting to be experts, man. And so if anybody else finds me obnoxious, hey man, I get it. I hate all the experts too. And if I'm one of them, then just okay. So anyway, what? How did I get into this? Because you mentioned other podcasts, and you were talking about. I was just thinking about the sea of people. Oh, and I know it's because I was talking about my boot camp, and here I am talking about like the problem is there's so much information out there that information is like worthless at this point. Not that's not no no no. It's not worthless for people that are consuming it and learning from it. But in terms of like somebody trying to produce YouTube content to be like valuable, like, oh, I've got something to tell you about pool. It's like, man, it's all out there. Everything that could be thought of and said is practically thought of and said. And so it just seems like so then the question I always ask is like, well, then why do I still coach? Why don't I just tell people, hey man, everything's online for free. Good luck. And and I just think that if people are questioning whether they should come work with me, just realize you're not coming here so I can be an expert and prance around and tell you everything I know about pool because I'm not an expert about everything and I'm not special and it's not information that you're missing. But what's important is finding the right things that are missing. So if there's a million things about pool or a thousand things about pool that are important, well, you might know 950 of them. So then my job is to figure out the ones that are missing and lead you to it. And then not just tell you about it, but help you develop those things because we're going to get into a little bit about the learning curve. But I'm going to help guide you. And I'm not just going to do a lesson and teach you something. We're going to like train and train and train and develop it into your game. So you just play differently. And I just got messages the last week from people telling me excitedly about different breakthroughs they've had since they've gone home, how that things have come together, how they're seeing things in their game differently, how they've, run their first rack or how they've won their first match against a top player or how their stroke feels or just different high water marks that they've hit. And so I will this is my public announcement. I am not going to quit coaching. I'll keep doing this because in a sea of information that I don't want to be a part of, we still make good things happen at the dojo. And it's a good time to reach out because uh, it's always a little slow between Thanksgiving and New Year. And then after this, my phone starts ringing a lot. So, right now I've got openings in February, March. And if you wait a month, it'll probably be booked out for a while. So if anybody wants to make a quick trip to Minnesota, here you go. So there's my plug. Thank you for listening. Oh, and a shout out to AJ and Joe. Joe and AJ came a year ago and trained with me, and then they came back again and trained again. They wanted to do 3 more days and get into some other stuff. And Joe listens to this podcast. So, man, for all of you guys, I want to thank everybody who comes and trains with me and everybody that tunes into this thing. But I was just talking to Joe, and he was telling me that he listened to all these podcasts. And I'm like, man, I appreciate you guys listening to these. So, thank you.
yeah, it's awesome.
So, what have you
I was
been up
just
to?
thinking it's kind of
Yeah,
funny, not that we like with all these like YouTube things, like you should just create like a couple different little like ad copy things and then just log in your YouTube account and leave it in the comment section like, "Oh, this is awesome. If you want to learn more, like just spam everybody else's YouTube with your with your boot camp stuff."
dude,
Just to
I
be
don't know, man. There's
insufferable.
there's like some guerrilla marketing. It's the wild west out there
It
online as
is,
far as
yeah.
like carving out market space and fighting algorithms. And
Well,
it's a game. Yeah,
it is, yeah. And so the one thing you were saying, like how there's so much information out there, it is kind of weird, like in the time that we're in now, like there's so much of it being pumped out there every day that I feel like kind of like what probably what you were saying is it's hard to even like sift through it. Like I was thinking about like if I didn't know what I was doing playing pool and I just hopped on and because I've seen tons of content, I'm like, how would I even know where to start? Or like what information is actually good? And what, you know what I mean? Because like there's endless content on there and like I've seen some people say some stuff I'm like this is not even close to being true, you know, but then there's obviously some really good content out there too. So I don't know. It'd be tough to navigate, I think.
Yeah,
But
yeah. And a lot of it, man, it's like the problem is that it's this weird thing where for sure there's a lot of people that are genuinely putting out content because they care about people, they want to share stuff that they know is going to be useful and that's been helpful for them. I mean, for sure that's the primary motivator. Nobody's getting rich doing this. I get it. Um, I think though that the problem is that it's rare. You're not going to find people that have like 5 followers very often. You're gonna find the big channels before you find the small channels, and the big channels got big by trying to cater to the masses as much as possible.
yeah,
And so you're because of the way it works, it's like you're always going to see the like the mainstream talk, like the bullet, and everybody's attention spans are really short too. So then you're going to see like the mainstream appealing things that kind of go viral, and you're not necessarily. I don't know. It's so the point is that if you're looking at YouTube to learn, of course you're going to learn, but and if it's just it's going to be filtered through. You're going to be learning things, but you're only going to learn what you see, and what you see is going to be filtered through a lens of what everybody else was searching for and responding to, which might not always be the most important stuff. You know what I mean? It's weird. So anyway.
for sure. Yeah. No, it's definitely a like you said, an algorithm game. It's trying to go viral and whoever is good at that game kind of gets to the top, whether they have the true expertise or not. They're good at the YouTube game, you know?
And I'm like, I think we're doing, I don't know about you. I didn't tell you this, Jesse, but I'm like doing the opposite, which is I almost like, I don't edit these and I ramble and I'm just like, I don't know. Like, it's almost like I'm trying to get fired, the people where they hate their job, but they kind of like they're going to keep working. They can't really quit their job. So they just kind of like self sabotage and wait for their
Yeah.
boss to fire them. Like, I kind of feel like that, like quietly, I'm just waiting for Nate Mendham to call me up and being like, don't record anymore. And I'll be like, all right.
Yeah.
I'll be like, you got me. So okay. Anyway, uh, good stuff. So what else have you been up to? Like people probably think that we just hang out and play pool all the time, but honestly, since our last podcast, we have not gotten together hardly, and I haven't seen you in almost 2 months. So what have you been up to, man?
Yeah. Yeah, it has been a while. Yeah, I've been pretty busy with work. Yeah, Brianna and I went on a vacation, I think right after we talked last, maybe right around Thanksgiving time. So did that. Just been busy kind of catching up with the work, hanging out with the kid. I still hit a few balls at home, of course, but not a ton. I went and played
Yeah.
a pretty long session today with O'Keefe. So
Oh, good, good, good.
yeah, we played some bar table because we got that Seacoast this weekend.
That's
So
right. That's right.
yeah.
Say hi to. Actually, don't say hi to anyone for me. But no, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. If
We'll edit that out. We'll edit that out
no, there's some good people down there. There's some good people.
for
Um,
sure.
good stuff, man. Well, I hope you guys do well.
Yeah,
Yeah,
should be fun.
good
But
stuff.
aside from that, yeah, just hanging out, man. Living life. So what about you?
Cool. Oh, just the same story. I've been boot camping hard. Holidays with family is all good. And then I did a cool stream, by the way. Here's a funny thing before we get into our main topic. I did a stream with little Chris the other day, and for anybody that's interested, search up on the algorithm. I'm like some old timer. Look up on the www on the World Wide Web. You got to go to the World Wide Web and look up Little Chris Emmett Pool Boot Camp, and the title was like Invisible Blockers. And here was the premise of it. I'll tell you guys the premise, and I'll give you. There's a lot of examples in the video. I think it's hysterical, Jesse, when people dog a run out that they wouldn't have dogged if there was more congestion on the table. So let me
Yeah.
explain. I set up the first example I set up was a 3 ball run where somebody had to make the first ball, and then they just had to make sure they didn't get too flat on the second ball, and then it would be like an easy out. But the way it was set up, they had to follow, like they were playing shape for a ball on the side rail, and they had to like shoot a ball on the side and follow over to that side rail, but then bounce off enough to get an angle. And I'm sure everybody would realize looking at this layout that they needed an angle, but they wouldn't really realize how much angle they needed or how important it was. And that once in a while, I see people follow the ball over to the side rail bump off it like 2 or 3 inches and get a little flat where it's really hard to get on the next ball.
Hmm.
And so they've got this 3 ball run and they mean to get an angle, but they just don't really put enough emphasis on it and they get a little bit flatter they meant to. And then they suddenly, it's awkward. And it occurred to me, like, say this was a 3 ball run of 8 ball, like they have a couple solids in the 8, that if you put a stripe on the rail where they, if they followed over and didn't come off the rail far enough, they'd get hooked behind that stripe. Nobody would ever hook themselves there. Like they would all make sure they got far enough off the rail to run out.
Yeah.
And so then, but without that stripe there, people just don't put the same priority on it and they follow over as they don't bounce off enough and they get flat. And so then I had this weird moment where like this stuff kind of, this is the stuff I think about at night, I guess. Why, if they have a 3 ball run with 2 solids in the 8, why would they 1 in 3 times fail this run out? But if I put a stripe there blocking off some of that flat area, all of a sudden their run out percentage goes up. Why, if I put a blocker ball there, would their run out percentage go up? And it's like, because it forces them to prioritize getting
Yeah.
a shot in a way that just needing an angle doesn't click in their reptilian brain or something. And I was starting getting fascinated by this idea of like invisible blockers. Like if you're failing to run out balls that you would have run out had I set up blocker balls, then why don't you just do that in your mind and figure out where you need to be and then get there? And so anyway, I did this video with little Chris. I think anybody wants to go check it out, but it's kind of a funny idea. Like why should it be that a blocker ball would make your run up percentage get better? Isn't that weird?
It is, but it makes perfect sense to me. I mean, I did that today, honestly, on that's why I mean I get a lot of crap. I'll read some comments here and there. I'll hear people say like how like slow I'll
How
play it,
slow? I know. Yeah.
And this is the reason why I do that is because there's it's super easy to be like running out racks or when things are going great, like the racks are wide open, they're not really congested. A lot of times you get away with a lot of very minor errors because you have that extra space, right? And I feel like you don't even realize that you're not really zoned in and that you're not actually playing as good as you think you are, but just because of the results, like you're still kind of getting out, whatever. You don't really realize that you come across too far, but you bump into a ball and you're like, yeah, I mean, of course. So like I've seen this happen so many times, and I've eventually like I just made it this thing where I was like, all right, on every ball, no matter how easy it is, I'm gonna walk around the table and I'm gonna make sure that my final thought process and where I'm gonna like the direction I'm gonna bring the cue ball and like the pretty much the pinpoint spot is the most optimal thing to do. And for me, it's the only thing I've ever found where if I just kind of like stay, disciplined and do that, where I get the best results. But that kind of goes into another topic. But I think, yeah,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
it's something that I feel like a lot of like average or lower rated players, like if they're kind of coming up that learning curve, that's something they should really stress is that even like you said, even though things look super easy and chances are you're going to run out no matter what, it's still extremely important to be focusing on like every ball as if it's like every ball should be the same no matter how easy or difficult the shot.
So this is interesting. Now it's funny because a couple of years ago we talked about what do people need to work on at different Fargo levels. Like if we didn't know what level, if we've never seen them play and all we knew is their Fargo rate,
Yeah,
what would we guess that they need to work on? We had a fun conversation, and I'll never
I
forget what
remember
you
that.
said
Yeah,
about the 600 level. You said people at 600 are always trying to catch a gear, and that they need to be a little bit more deliberate. And I couldn't agree more. And so as I've thought about this though, and we had a really good conversation in the stream I did with Chris. So for people that are interested, like Jesse said, this is a kind of a different road that we're not going to go too far down. But I did go down this road a bit with Chris and with the people in chat. And one of the things that I think we hit on is one of the reasons why people don't do this is because they have trouble shifting between thinking and performing. And in pool is a game where you have to think and then you have to perform, and then you have to think and then you have to perform. And for people that get into analysis paralysis and they start thinking too much and then they start becoming more and more controlling or less and less confident, because as the more they think, the more disconnected they get from their body and the more stuff they start seeing that can go wrong, and then they lose confidence and they start getting more in their head and they start thinking negative thoughts. And so some people just don't know how to manage that. And so they just feel like the best thing for me to do is just fire at balls and kind of run around the table and just try to get some momentum and I don't want to slow down because if I start thinking, I'm just dead. And so I think there's a lot of people that are afraid of themselves. And so
hmm
they don't know how to integrate a strategic part of their brain with the performing part of their brain. You know what I mean? So I had some interesting conversation about that. But what are your thoughts about that? Any suggestions or what? How do you do that?
So, yeah, I don't know. I think I'd want to think that one through because I feel like I could just like
Careful though. You
blabber out
don't
some.
overthink it, Jesse. You don't
Yeah,
want
yeah, don't overthink it. It's like when you hit your there's a term for it, but it's like you're basically like your flow state, right? It's like you're kind of looking to hit that with pool. I don't know if I'd have like great advice on that because I've had to like tweak that for myself over the years and I know what works for me, you know? And a lot of it has to do with like a repetitive thought process, like shot to shot, and maintaining like a similar like a pretty similar speed, you know, not getting to allow myself to not get like overexcited, but also, not doing the other side too, which is over worrying too much. And then you're over analyzing, you're playing like too slow. There is no rhythm at all. And then you're just kind of stumbling over yourself, you know? So it's definitely a tricky balance, but I don't really want to it's not that I'm trying to hide anything. I just don't want to give like general advice on that because I feel like everybody might be a touch different, you know?
Well,
Everybody's
yeah,
brain
yeah,
is
yeah.
a little bit different and
So then it's
I think
interesting.
it comes easier.
It's interesting to think where might be the differences be versus what might be similar between all types of players versus what's more individual. Because there's probably things that are individual to you, but then there might be things that are universal across groups.
Yeah, and the one other thing too is like you and I, we understand the game very well. We've seen all the shots, for the most part, over and over. So the pattern and like the shot's going to come to us a lot quicker than it is somebody that's 150 or 200, Fargo points lower. So I mean, I just in general, execution kind of comes with the knowledge too. Like you figure it out as you go, but I think we're just able to kind of go through that thought process a little bit quicker, and that's where I'm just kind of hesitant on giving exact advice.
Yeah, so this is something I did share a lot at the end of the stream with some ideas on how to balance that because so a couple thoughts I'll end with on this for me is so the first part is people that say, well, I don't want to think what I play because then I it just doesn't work for me. Well, that's like that's a concession that you don't want to make. It's a prohibitive. You can't do that. Like you can't do
Yeah.
that. You can do that. I mean, you can. It's just not very effective to make that conclusion. You have to find a way to integrate and balance. And so the better question is, how can I be more strategic when I play without? Well, how can I gain more from being strategic that I lose in performance? That's the question. You got to optimize your play, and and so yeah, once in a while you might overthink something and bog down and miss a shot because you get in your own mind. But boy, if you avoid four pitfalls and run out four times that you would have dogged earlier, then that's still a net positive. So
Right.
you just have to be optimal. And then the other part, what was I going to say? The other part was as far is that the more you practice it, the less bad. Like Jesse said, pattern recognition comes with work. So as you work on this stuff, it starts taking less and less brain power because you start seeing it more and more obviously, and so therefore it doesn't take you out of your rhythm as much because eventually you just get to the point where the program's always running and it runs quiet and it runs quick and you see what you need to see without having to stop and take yourself out of a huge rhythm. So
Yeah. Yeah. That's it on that.
cool. Well, so Jesse, you reached out and here I'll introduce the topics by reading your text message because you already asked. You reached out and you said, I can't bleep that out. I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
Okay. That was the whole thing. You said one was dealing with plateaus and pool you wanted to talk about. And then the other one was kind of like talking a little bit about shot taking and how yeah, this is actually good because I've actually gotten this question a few times. Even with my students, I have a little training group that I run for people that have trained with me on Facebook, and I just had this question come up. People are asking like, what's the right ratio of like how much of the time should I be playing better players, weaker players, things like this. So what was your thoughts behind that topic? Like, what prompted you?
I don't really, it just kind of came to me. I don't know. I don't know why I was thinking about it. Maybe, yeah, I don't know. I mean, maybe I was thinking about like my pool career and the downward spiral, and no, I don't know. I was just, yeah, I mean, I don't know. It was a thought that popped in my head, and I probably just started thinking about my experiences in pool and kind of how I handled it.
So
And
what are
then
your thoughts? Like when you were, what when what do you want to share about your own journey about shot taking?
Yeah, I
And
mean,
what is
I
shot
don't
taking for people that don't know?
sure. So I don't really know what's optimal necessarily, but when I was kind of coming up, later teens and starting to play pretty good pool. I mean, I just started to pretty much play at least in the area, all the Masters tournaments, when I was like 16 or 17, something like that. And then I mean, I never really like shied away from playing anything, but tournaments are a little bit different. And then as far as like gambling with guys, I mean, there was only a handful of guys that were like that would really kind of play anyways. But I remember I fired at Bo a couple times when I definitely like I was not going to win. Not playing like longer sets to 20 and 30, but it was like just important to do because I needed to kind of see, how far off am I really from where he's at, and then just kind of check yourself with different players, right? But I think I think when you decide like what shot taking means to you, I mean, or like what makes the most sense for you, I feel like you kind of have to have a pretty good idea of your motivation to not only get better, but like you should have an idea of like what your next handful of years are probably going to look like. So like right now, I mean, I don't really have an interest in quote unquote shot taking because I've already fired at like, the toughest tournaments in the world, essentially. I mean, aside from the actual world championships, right? But like at this point, I don't really view if I go to play one of those tournaments as like taking a shot because I already know where I stand, right? I already know that I'm going to get my nut shot in 90% of the time, but it's just kind of fun to bear down and see if I can win a couple sets. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think it's just an, I don't know. I'm not really getting a clear answer, I guess, but I just
Well,
think
I
it's an
think
interesting topic.
what you've kind of mentioned. Okay, so let's let's take a look because you've mentioned several different motivations for shot taking. So the primary motivation that you and I think of when we think about shot taking, one of the biggest reasons why you and I think like, oh, playing, stepping up and playing a little bit out of our weight class and taking shots at better players. Like if somebody were to ask you point blank, what's the reason why you want a shot take? Go ahead. Like if you had one answer, not multiple answers, multi-pronged, what's the biggest benefit or what's the biggest reason to shot take, Jesse?
Uh, to get better is
Okay.
like the short
Yep. That's
answer.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yep.
it. And the fact is that there are other reasons to shot take. So one other reason to shot take is because when you hit, there might be a lot of upside and reward. So some people shot take because it feels so good when you scout some people and look at me, or or they have a lot of negative doubts and fears about a lot of negative voices in their mind that says I'll never be able to do it, and they don't want to prove it wrong. So they shot take and beat somebody, and then they get to prove I can do that after all, or I can prove it to everybody else and all this stuff. So the other people have other, and some people shot take because they're like, I I want to make money. And I think if I go out and play these big tournaments, I think I can, win a bunch of money. And, so I think that you might be, you and I, though, and maybe most people think that the reason for shot taking is to improve. Maybe that's conventional wisdom. But I think that you and I are kind of a small sample size of two people that also happen to be fairly successful with pool. And so therefore we might just assume everyone thinks that way. Maybe not everyone thinks that way. But like for me, for sure, shot taking was like, I just need to play the best players I can play because I want to get as good as I can get. So obviously, the more the better, bring it on. I want to get to the top. Like that seems so obvious to me. But I would assume everyone thinks that way, but not everybody thinks that way. So I just wanted to kind of point out that it seems obvious to me and you that that's the alpha and omega reason, but maybe that's not universal.
Yeah, and I think one hidden or sort of hidden reason and a benefit that comes from, taking shots is no matter what, even if you don't have like a ton of success kind of playing outside your comfort zone, when you go back to what you're used to playing, I, I feel like you just become a lot more, I mean, you're more comfortable and I feel like you become more dominant because you realize that you're like, oh, like these guys are kind of quote unquote in my weight class, but now I'm, kind of trading sets or at least taking sets off guys that play way better. And then it gives you this sense of confidence that you're like, yeah, I mean, it sounds kind of bad to say, but like not like the people that are rated near you are like now beneath you, but in your mind, you kind of helps out the ego a little bit,
Well, it does. Well,
helps the
there's something,
confidence,
there's a few things. I mean, there's a bunch of things about it. So let's talk about, let's just focus on this one subcategory of how it makes you better. And right now we're going to talk about kind of how it toughens you up just in terms of name, being starstruck. If you are playing a bunch of guys, like if you're a hometown guy and you live in a town of 50,000 people, and the top, you got a couple of guys that are 680 to 700 Fargo, or maybe one guy if you drive an hour, and then most of the guys are around 580 to 620. And let's just suppose you're a 600 Fargo. And a lot of the guys, there's a few guys that can beat you and a lot of guys that can push you, but you're one of the better players around. Well, when you play that 680 in the finals of that tournament, it's like, man, this guy is like the top dog around here and he plays good and he always beats me. And I'm not saying it's just he's in your mind, he's kind of like the top dog. He's, and so, but when you go to Derby and you go to Turning Stone or you go to Texas Open and you start playing other tournaments, and all of a sudden you've played 10 or 20 sets against guys that are 780 to 800 to 820 speed, and you've played Lee Van Corteza and you were actually like 3-3 going 9, and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm trading racks with Lee Van Corteza, and then all of a sudden he runs like 6 racks on you and he beats you 9-3, and you're just like, what just happened? And or you play a set and all of a sudden you just get, like, every time that you leak out anything, the guy just punishes you with multiple racks and just shell shocks you and barrages you. Well, then you go back and you play that 680 and you're like, man, you're letting me shoot every rack. Like every rack I'm getting to the table. Like, you're not rating packages. I'm getting chances at the table. If I miss, it's gonna, yeah. In the past you used to think, man, if I miss, he's gonna run out. But now you're like, yeah, if I miss, he's probably just gonna run one. It's not probably gonna run the whole set out. Like, all of a sudden it just feels different.
Yeah, the perspective changes for sure.
So that really does help. And then when like you said, when you've taken sets off some top players, then when you draw a guy who's 660 or 680, you're just like, well, he's good, but it just perspective. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then how else, you were talking about kind of like playing bow, and how, but when you were very young and you weren't, because you wanted to see like where your game breaks, like like, I know you're going to win, but show me where you win. Is that kind of the idea?
Yeah, a
Talk
little
about
bit. I mean, at that time, he was still playing, like we would play all the weekly tournaments around here, or at least the ones that like shooters at the time, and you know, so I would play against him a couple times a week anyways, because we'd probably meet in the tournament at some point, unless I dogged out earlier. But yeah, it was kind of just like trying to climb the mountain in some sense, right? Like I would be able to beat him here and there, but I knew deep down that he was just a better player. So I was like, well, why is he a better player? And I loved playing at the time, so I was like, why not just play a bunch of games against the guy? And I actually remember, like I said, I did play him a couple longer sets. And I remember one time because we actually talked about it afterwards. He was like totally like kind of shocked at the time, like he didn't really know what to think because I he thought it like maybe it was like an ego type of thing when I asked him if he wanted to play like a race to 30. We played like a $200 or $300 set. It was just cheap, but I just wanted to play him on a big table, so and in a long set, and he didn't really know how to take it because he in his eyes he's like, well, why would you like, do you think you can like, do you think you're better than me, is that why you want to play? And it has nothing to do with it. It was just like it was worth the investment for me to kind of see. Yeah,
Well, he didn't know you. He didn't know you were just planning on air barreling him anyway, so you didn't really care what
that's
you played
true.
for.
Yeah.
No, wait, that's not you. That's never mind.
So
Okay.
yeah, we won't go there.
Shout out
Yeah,
to other people that he doesn't
that's
listen to
just
he doesn't listen to podcast anyway, so it's okay.
okay.
But
Yeah,
anyway, okay. So then here's a question. Yeah. Okay. So but before we, so that point was, it's kind of a leak finder. You might understand somebody's got a higher Fargo rate than you, and that you can't beat them. But where does your game break down? And
yeah,
it's not always what you think. It's not always what you think, because it can be physical, it can be mental. You might think things against a guy that's higher rated than you that you just never ever think those thoughts when you're playing somebody at the same speed. You don't have to deal with the same mental demons of feeling insufficient or feeling like the guy, you see the guy perform and then you're like, I don't have a game plan for this. There's nothing I do as good as this guy. What's my game plan? You don't think those thoughts when you're playing guys that don't outperform you, and so it just puts you experience adversity that you don't experience otherwise, and then you have to start learning how to deal with it. And then it shows you like a leak finder. It shows you where you're weak in your game. It shows you where it breaks down. It calls your attention to it, and then it's really motivating. So it gives you really good feedback and really good motivation, and then you also get to see that it's not so far apart. So it's, on the one hand, it's discouraging, but on the other hand, you're like, man, like I lost to a guy I played recently. I played a bad sesh, and I played very poorly. and it was still like really close sets, and it was kind of encouraging. I'm like, man, I felt so bad, but I'm like, as bad as I played, it wasn't that lopsided. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
so that's always kind of encouraging because I'm like, man, if I could plug, I don't have to be perfect, but if I can just manage 2 or 3 leaks, I'm not so far away from where I want to be. So anyway, so those are some valuable things about shot taking. So then, is there such a thing as too much shot taking?
Um, that's a good question. Um, well, I feel like if you if you can handle losing mentally, like well enough where it doesn't discourage you and kind of, kill your confidence in your normal competition, so to speak, then I don't really think there's a problem with shot taking like endlessly, as long as it's not, destructive to your finance or to your like mental health in some sort of way, you know? The more you could do and the more, I mean, that's just the quicker you're going to learn. And in my opinion, I wish I would have done it a lot more when I was younger, but then again, it's like you don't have endless money as a kid either, so you can't get the best games out of people either when you're not willing to like bet something, right? Like
That's right.
you
Yeah.
get how it works. So it's like people are gonna have fun, but for $20 sets, people are only gonna try so hard. So
Yeah. No, I get it. So I feel like now listen, you mentioned something which earlier, which is like it has to be part of a plan. So if you don't have any plan to like improve at pool, if you're not trying to get better, if you don't have goals, if you don't have motivation to improve, then shot taking just to say you did it, obviously, like we're talking about shot taking, like the primary reason of it is to improve. And so if that's not a goal of yours, or if you don't really have the time and energy to put in the pool to get better, maybe it doesn't make sense. But speaking for like how I look at it kind of fires me up when people ask that question. Is there like, and people sometimes give this, they give two examples. They say, well, if you're playing a guy straight pool and every turn he runs 500 balls, you never get to shoot. How is that good for your game? And then they start putting Fargo gap limits on it. Like if you play a guy 50 to 100 points better than you, that's fine. But anything more than that, you don't even get to shoot. I've heard that. The other thing I've heard is, well, if you just lose all the time, you're not really learning how to win, and it's not good. You should know this. But here's my take on it, and this is just my take. So you don't have this is an opinion. It's not a fact, right? But my stance is, given the choice, always play the best players you can as much as you can, hands down. That's it. Simple. Just steer into the hardest players you can play as often as you can play them. Crank the wheel as far towards the shot take direction as you can, and that everything else is garbage because it's like it would be like somebody worried about eating too many vegetables because they're afraid their diet's going to get, well, don't I need some sugar and carbs though too? It's like nobody gets enough vegetables. Everyone gets too much sugar. Don't worry about eating too much broccoli. You know that you're not going to have a
yeah,
dietary problem because you eat too much broccoli. Just as much as you can. Eat as much vegetables as you can. It's like drinking too much water and worrying about an overdose. To me, this is ridiculous. And I feel the same as you. I tried to shot take as much as I can when I was a kid. I spent I would empty my pockets and go like I would search under couch cushions to scrounge money up to play the best players around and play them as often as I could and watch them play. And when I couldn't play them, I'd watch them play and then I'd play them as often as I could. And then I'd play the best players I could as much as I could. And I've done that all my life. And that's how you get better. And so that's how I feel, and I think that's how you feel. And so it's like we just happen to be two of the better players in our area. So it's like I don't know, man. I just if other people have other opinions on this, and I'm almost done with this. It just obviously fired me up on Easy Billiards. Somebody was talking about this, and a lot of people have this idea that this is just like rumors that top players spread because they like people to donate to them. And I'm like,
yeah, that's funny.
it's so cancerous. And I'm like, no, man. And finally, there's all these people rolling their eyes about not wanting to donate money to top players, and you don't need to play better players to get better. And there's so much instruction online, and you can practice your basement. I'm like, no, it's a bunch of garbage because you can't practice your basement until you're good enough to handle the adversity that comes from playing better players. There's no way to wait till all the lights are green before you leave the house. You have to get in the ring, get in the ring, get in the ring. Nobody, it's ridiculous. And that and then I said you have to consider the source. And so all these people that are talking about not donating money to better players, if those people if they have career achievements that inspire you, then go ahead and listen to them. But like that doesn't none of the people that have that attitude have any kind of career accomplishments that dwarf mine. You know whose career you know whose careers dwarf mine are the people that are really going out there. Like if you look at Tyler Steyer, all he's been doing for the last 8 years is shot taking. He's just been shot taking and shot taking and shot taking. And like, I'm just going to keep playing the best players of the world until I get there. I'm going to keep playing the best players of the world until I get there. And now he's not an 850. He's not top three ranked, but he's got a successful pool career. And he didn't get there by wanting to avoid shot takes and trying to figure out in his basement, watching YouTube content and playing weaker players, how to put his game together. It's just, it's so ridiculous. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting topic for sure, and we can spend a little time on it. It is tricky when you start talking about like matching up and when there's money involved because I can understand both sides. I can understand like lesser players thinking like, well, yeah, this is just all the good players wanting to scalp everyone for free money. But like if you look at it, like there has to be a level of that, you know, there has to be a level of that for the not only just for like there to be like a healthy pool economy, but for there be to be like an infrastructure in place where you can climb up and learn. Because what ends up happening, right, is guys like us now in our area, like we don't play pool because we're not allowed to, like aside from a few times a year, which is it's fine. It's just the way it is. We've had other discussions on that. But it's kind of sad for guys who are getting good that are like, like get to like 600 and then like, mid 600s and then what do they do when they get to like 660, 670, you know? The one guy that I think of we both is like Hank, right?
I
Like
was just
Hank
going to mention Hank, by the way, because
like
yeah,
he's playing pretty good pool right now, but the one downside is that not that he would get his nut shot off, but like he doesn't have to like fire at you, me, TJ, like Rob, like all these guys every
if he was
weekend.
taking seventh, eighth everywhere he went, he'd be better
Yes.
off. But
And
instead,
he
we're all
was
kicked out.
Fargo,
Yeah.
like, so, I mean, I don't, I wish his Fargo the best. Like, he's a good kid. I hope I just think that it's unfortunate. It's out of his control, but I think his Fargo rate is going to end up about 20 points or so, maybe 30 points lower than what it should be because he's not having to like, fire against all of us guys every single weekend. Because you learn quickly
So
yeah.
here's the thing about Hank, and I was going to mention something about him. I was for a different reason. Um, so you're right. And so when we think about like the effects of Fargo caps and in local pool scenes, it's just that there's so for those okay, so people don't know who we're talking about. Hank, I met him when he was 10. He played on my daughter's pool team, and I got to be good. I started coaching him, and then I've gotten to be friends with him. I think he's 16 now, and he's quickly approaching an age to where I'll always be kind of a mentor, figure in his life, but at some point you go from being like an adult child to kind of becoming like pool buddies at some point, and that shift will eventually happen. Um, and I'm hoping to get. I've been trying to push to get him out to bigger tournaments. There's been, it's hard to get, 16-year-olds to out of state tournaments. It's just challenging for different reasons. So anyway, hopefully
Kidnapping.
as he gets older and he's 18 and plus, it'll be easier to get into bigger tournaments. But the problem is that there's only one kid like that per state. And so our local Fargo cap community is not really thinking about what's best for Hank. They're thinking about what's best for the majority. So obviously, this is not the best for Hank. But what I was going to say, though, is when people use finances as an excuse, I really don't agree because I don't, okay, I played a guy last night. We sparred all night for fun. I played the guy you played yesterday. I played him 2 nights ago, and we sparred for 4, 5, 6 hours for fun. I got to the point where I just play guys for fun anymore because if somebody was to ask me like, "Hey, I want to spar with you to try to push myself to get better," like how much would we have to play for me to be like, okay, now if they're people I don't know and they're just calling me up to play, like yeah, I'd like to play for something. I feel like I don't know you. I don't, we're not if we're not doing this as friends, we're doing this to spar. I'd like to bet something, but like honestly, man, what's the like if somebody called you out of the blue, it was like, hey, I hear you're a really good player. I'd love to play you some big table 9 ball sometime, races to 7. Like if you don't know them, they just seem like a normal person. What would it take to get you on your off day to go play them some 9 ball sets? What's the minimum you'd play for 20 for races to 7? Would you play for 10? Would you play for 20? Would you play for 50? Like what's your how much would you take for you to go to a pool?
Yeah, I mean, if I know him, I would play for less. Because I feel like it'd be more like hanging out like a guy like Dave, right, or something. But
Yeah.
I feel like at that point, like probably anything less than like 50 a set would be kind of I mean, even that's not really worth the time if you want to break it down, but it's enough where it's like, all right, we'll just play for something here, and then somebody's gonna win either, $100 or $200 after 5, 6 hours, and at least it'll be kind of worth playing a little bit. Not
Yeah,
to
yeah.
put a price on necessarily, but you kind of have to in a sense. Like,
No, I get it. If it's a stranger, because there's a balance. Like I don't offer coaching for free because it's my full-time profession. And at some
yeah,
point, when you're playing somebody just to help them with their game and you don't know them, at some point it's like, oh, you almost got to charge for that. But for me, it's to the point where it's like I would have probably said this, like if I was doing it for the money, it's like yeah, I'd probably want to play a minimum of 50 a set. But if it's a person that we were on first name basis, or maybe they maybe we met at a pool tournament one time and had an exchange, or we played a simple. Okay, suppose it's a guy that you played a tournament match with and you beat him and he really enjoyed playing you, and then he was sitting around watching you play later in the tournament, watching your match, and said some nice things to you, and then he reached out by text and said, hey man, I really enjoyed our set. I'd love the opportunity to play against you more than once in a while. It sucks you're kicked out. Would you ever get together? Like it wouldn't be hard for him to talk if you just said, hey man, I'm tight on cash. I don't have a chance. I can't play you 50 a set. Could we get together? I'll pay your time and we just play like 20 a set. Like you probably do that just because he seems like a cool guy, I don't know.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it, it's weird because I don't want to sound like it's like it is about the money, but it's also, and then make it seem like it's, I don't know, it's a weird balance. But for me, it's less about that. It's because I don't like really love playing pool as much as I used to. So
Yeah,
I
yeah.
have to have like I have to be able to justify to myself that like
For you
I
to
want
give up a day
to just get
off,
there and
yeah.
play. It has nothing to do with like, hey, you owe this to me because you're gonna learn and I'm not. It's nothing about that. It's just that I gotta like, do I really want to put the cues together today?
It's
Like
almost
aside
like if Shane Van Boning calls you up and said, "Hey Jesse, I
from
actually should I want to help you with your game. Can we be a CR?" Like if Shane, okay, I'm sorry, I love you, Shane. If Shane called you up and offered to help you with your game, you'd be like, sorry, Shane, I'm a little busy, but if you'd have to pay me $50 a set to help me with my, I mean, you'd say hit the same. I'm just saying, like, it's not even about the money; it's about your time at this point. So, but let me answer the question. Let me make my point. And
Well,
like I
that's the
said,
funny
I'm
part too with the Shane. Like, if Shane came and I would want to play for a little bit more because like I want it to sting a little bit if I not like bad, but like I wouldn't want to play Shane Race December 20. I'm like, we at least got to play $100 sets, and like I know I'm gonna get my nuts shot off, but like I want to have a reason to bear down and like try to snipe for a couple hundred.
and when you win, you don't want him to be like, yeah, I sniped him because we were playing below his interest level. You want to bet enough to where, because it's like, let's be clear, Shane is not Shane. $20 Shane is not the same as $100 Shane, and $100 Shane is not the same as $10,000 Shane. And I
Yeah,
can't afford, and nor do I want to play $10,000 Shane, but I can afford, and I do want the $200 Shane.
yeah,
You know what I mean? I don't want to beat the $20 Shane. What's the point of that? So anyway, okay. But
exactly.
my
Yep.
my whole point, Jesse, was I don't have very much time in my life. I'm a busy guy with family and just coaching stuff. But I got to the point where the dollar amounts that I would play for were so nickel dime that like I just play people for fun anymore, because I play Hank for fun and I play Dave for fun and I play the guys that come over. I just like, just let's just play. Like we're not going to bet enough to matter anyway. So either I want to play you for fun or I just don't want to play. So I'm at the point where it's like I don't even really gamble anymore because it just doesn't even make sense. So but the funny part is that not that many people call me up wanting to play. Like you'd think that, as you'd think that your phone would be blowing up with guys wanting to play you for 50 and $100 sets. Like you wanted to play Bo and like I wanted to play so and so, but apparently that was just me and you that wanted to play those sets. And the only guy that blows me up is Hank. So there you go. Here he is. When he was, he's 16. He's like 670 something Fargo right now. He's playing probably stronger than that because he's on the upswing. And he's 16. He's one of the best players in town. Great kid. And he's the guy blowing me up. So me and Jesse both are passionate about as many shot takes as you can get. And then here's our best young player in our area that is on the playing very very strong, and he's playing you, he's playing me, he's winning all the local tournaments, he's playing everybody he can play. So all right. So I don't know, man. There's other reasons people don't want to shot take. I mean, money is usually their biggest excuse, but it probably just gets into like something else, which is most people just don't like to lose. So
I think that's what it is, man. I mean, again, we can move on, but I think
yeah.
that it just if there's a closing statement on this, it's I feel like anybody hearing this should take a good look in the mirror and think about be honest with yourself about why it is you don't want to play a guy that's not our speed, but just slightly better than you, or where you're going to lose the majority of the time. Why do you not want to like risk $100 playing that guy for 5 hours? Like, what's the real reason? And I think you'll pretty quickly come down and realize that it has nothing to do with the money once a month. It's the fact that you don't want your ego hurt. You don't want to feel that feeling of loss. You want to put yourself in good spots to win,
And I
for the
think
most
that
part.
yeah, I think that some people might say too, well, I know not only do I know that they would beat me, I know where. I see how they play. They do things I can't do. So why would I play them and lose when I already know that they do these things better? I just need to keep working on those things. I need to keep working on those things until when I see their game, it doesn't look so different. Then I want to try. What would you say to that?
Um, I mean, it is a fair point. If you know like what people are doing better, then yes, you should be practicing those things. But I think also, like kind of like you said earlier, you can't practice in the basement. You can't do that to get your way to the top. You still have to like get in there. You have to be in a spot where you're up against it, and you still have to perform to the best of your ability when you already know mentally that you're outmatched, because that's a different type, or that's like a different part of the competition, you know? Does that make sense? Like,
Yeah, yeah. And I think that and there's proof of this because kind of, I mean, proof is a strong word, but there's evidence. I'd say that at least I believe there is. So what I would say is that it's, necessity is the mother of invention. And you might tell yourself that, okay, for example, if I play you 10 ball, if Shane broke for me, I would be very live to win sets. If with me breaking for me, I need you to play a little off. Like I just if you're breaking, your break is so strong and my break is not where your break is at 10 ball. And it's if I had compensating factors other places, like if I could outmove you and outshoot you and out something else, if I had some other area of my game where I was stronger than you to compensate, maybe it would be different. But you're pretty much strong as me or better. And I mean, I don't really think I have some big edge on you in any other place of the game. So therefore, um, I've already got to play good at every other place of my game to be live. And then breaking against you, if I'm not like it's a huge hill to climb. So I could sit here and be like, oh, I just need to break better. Like I need to break better 10 ball if I'm ever gonna be live to beat Jesse sets more than when you're just not playing well or not that engaged. And it's like, okay, so I can tell myself that. Then what do? I go home and I practice my break for a day or two. And then, it's really easy to go back to just doing stuff I enjoy or playing straight pool or doing stuff I like to work on. And yeah, I know a break's important, but I'm not really playing Jesse this month. And so, I mean, I'm sure I'll get to that at some point. But if I played you like once a week and we just played 10 ball for 6 hours once a week, like it would be, like not only not, it's just, I don't know, man. You can tell yourself you want to get better at those things and you can tell yourself you're trying to work on it. But I don't know. Iron is forged in the burning flames of loss. It's not forged. Does that make any sense? Like if
it
you
does,
just got
yeah.
to play guys that just constantly punish you and punish you and punish you, and not only that, but also show you how to do it again and again. So it's not something in your mind that's like some trick shot. It's like no, that's how it should look, and you just have to stare at it and pay the guy and say, okay, that's how you did it. Now it's my turn, and they just at some point you just have to perform and you just have to figure it out. And that's the way people learn. And so my evidence for that is that that's how everybody learns. And if you look at all the top players, they all got there by playing each other. And there's endless conversations about how the Europeans and Filipinos are passing the US. And one of the big reasons is that they simply outcompete us. They compete against, I mean, there's Mike Page just did some post about this, about how the 700 Fargos in Minnesota. Did you see that when he was actually talking about guys in Minnesota versus guys in like I forget what part of Europe, if it was Scandinavia or something, but like he even said that they can track how many games different 700 level players are playing each other. And he said that in Minnesota, players over 700 are like islands where we very rarely play each other, whereas in Northern Europe, all these guys are playing each other all the time. And then
Yeah.
as a result of that, he also said that there was a similar populations and that we had a similar distribution of skills up to about the 750 level, but that all of a sudden past 750, that's where we tapered off. And we didn't really have too many people from our Minnesota, Wisconsin area that went beyond that compared to how many people get to the highest level in those other countries. And so there was a real strong correlation between how intermixed, like how often the top local players of these areas compete against each other and shot take, to how quickly, how much further they go in their career.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I didn't see that post exactly. I saw something about like, well, I ended up reading a bunch of the comments, but people were kind of commenting on like Fargo rate as a whole, like what they thought of it. And
Good.
I didn't really want to get into it, but yeah, there's always a conversation to be had about that. But yeah, it is too bad because it's very clear to see like when we don't compete against each other, I mean, I feel like my Fargo rate has been slowly declining. And I mean, obviously, I'm probably not playing my best pool overall, but I'm just not really playing any pool, There's no competitive pool for us. So I mean, it's no shock to me to hear that.
Yep. It's
But
the way of things. So
yeah.
this overlaps. We're not starting a whole new topic because I think this kind of overlaps with your other topic, which was plateaus in pool. So for people that are tired of hearing me, give your give yourself a pause, 5 minute break, halftime, and then Jesse, why do people get stuck at a certain level? Why do people plateau?
Yeah, so like I kind of told you, the way I'd probably start it was just talking about a little bit more of my experience. And like I hit a couple of plateaus in my pool career, whatever you want to call it. One of them was probably about the time when I was like 13 to 14. I know that's super young, but I had hit this, and for that I hit a plateau because I didn't have enough table time. Like I could only play during a little bit more like during the summer when I wasn't in school. And then during the school year, I would go down and play with two of my cousins in a junior league, and they had a table at their house. So I would go down there maybe once every 2 to 3 weeks to kind of just, get a bunch of junior uh, leagues in over the weekend or whatever. So I was basically constantly taking like 2 to 2.5 weeks off of pool with never hitting a ball and then just firing off like a 15-hour day of nonstop hitting balls, right? So maybe wasn't really a plateau, but it was just like I just yeah, I just didn't have the hours in, right? And then when I went from like probably when I was like 16 to maybe 19 or 20, that's when my game kind of really took a jump, and that's where I got into like the 700s with Fargo and started playing pretty good. But then I definitely hit another plateau even when I was playing kind of full time-ish, and I feel like my plateau there was a lot more mental than it was with the physical side of things. I mean, there was definitely a physical plateau as well. I didn't like put like diligent hours in every day fixing all the leaks and the fundamentals and stuff like that, right? But I think the mental one was like where I really noticed it. And I think what happened is I had desires in pool that I no longer or that I could clearly see were fading. And it wasn't like it wasn't like some drastic change. It was just like over a 6 month period, I just kind of realized that my heart was not really in the game much anymore. Like I didn't have the killer instinct as much. And then it was just like a slow, kind of taper down to like a not a permanent plateau, but
So,
definitely a
so
plateau.
this is interesting because I actually thought I was thinking about this because you texted me a couple days ago and I was thinking about this again. Resources. So I like to say input equals output. I mean, input equals output. So if people stop getting output, you got to look at what their input is doing. It's not complicated. And what's interesting though is that so there's different reasons why people, so one reason people plateau is because they hit an input restriction in their life. If they're married with kids and they got two newborns at home and a wife and a full-time job and they're doing a lot of stuff, maybe if they're already like, if that player got to like, 660 Fargo, playing locally and all of a sudden their life is just underwater and they don't have any table time or, it's like maybe they're not in a spot where they can do that much shot taking and they're not in a spot where they can really put a lot into the pool right now. So that
Right.
there's a point at which resources might be a restricting thing. As far so you mentioned that once when you were 13, 14, not having access to a table and having other stuff going on with school. And then you also mentioned, but the other part that was interesting is this mental thing. Uh, when you're saying your desire was waning, what and your heart wasn't in it, but what that did the way that that plateaued you, you said it wasn't, you said it might not have been physical, it might have been more mental, but maybe it was the mental because the mental manifested as less physical input. And so what happens is if you have two players that play identically, player A and player B, and player A believes that if they can get to the next level at pool, it's going to be the greatest thing in the world. And so they are going to give up everything. They're going to give up, you know, um, having a career. They're going to give up going to college. They're going to give up having family. They're going to give up having a house. They're going to give up any kind of retirement planning. They're just going to give up everything because they're so convinced that pool is going to fill every one of their emotional needs. And then player B is the same level, but they realize, you know what? I don't think pool is going to fill me in life. I've seen what the future holds for top players and what that road looks like. It's not it's not enough. It's not enough to fill me. It's exciting as heck. It would mean a lot. It would be special, but it's not going to fulfill everything I need. And I'm not willing to spend and sacrifice everything else in my life. Well, those people have two different stories in their mind. Well, which
Hmm.
story is going to lead to putting in more input? Is the pool is going to give me everything I want? And so
Yeah.
I think that in that case, you could say, well, you were player B. You started to realize that and I had the same thing. I had the same breakthrough when I was just turning 18. That's why I only got where I got in life. It's the same story. It's like I'm not. I saw the road ahead. I decided I wasn't going to sacrifice my life to it. So therefore, there was a limited amount of input I was going to put in compared to a guy like Tyler Steyer, who told him so he was player A, and he's like, no, 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 I'm going to the top. That's all that matters. And so I would say that it. You could say it was a mental, but it wasn't like a mental thing, like limiting beliefs. Like I don't know if I can get there. I'm not good enough. It wasn't like that. It was just maybe not worth it for me. And and then that manifested the same way that when you were 13, 14, you couldn't put in more table time. You got to the spot where it's not that you couldn't put in more table time, but it just didn't make sense to keep paying. It's almost like what do you call those video games where you have to pay to play? Like you could pay to unlock new abilities or pay to unlock
Yeah.
special stuff. It's like at some point it's like it's a pool is kind of a pay to play game where you have to sell a lot of your energy to improve. And at some point, people might not want to pay to play if they have to sacrifice big chunks of their life to improve. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Yeah, we've had a lot of discussions on this topic when we've been driving on the road, and um, you've always mentioned that how you're like you enjoy the input in the game a lot more now than you probably did when you were younger. I mean, you always enjoyed it, but like you can get enough fulfillment out of the input of the game and enjoying the competition, whereas like me, I'm kind of more looking for like what is the output of this? And if I'm not, then it feels like a chore, you know. Well, I remember you because you brought this up a couple times, but I think I told you when we were driving one time that like the way I feel is for pool to be worth it for me at this point, I would have to win the U.S. Open like 5 times to then be like, all right, it was worth me getting back into pool, you know. Like if I won a big tournament, just it wouldn't do anything for me because I'm like, I just don't. It doesn't mean anything to me, you know. So yeah, that is a tough thing. I mean, we're. Oh, go ahead.
No, no. And what's interesting is that I actually think that you're in a very healthy spot. And that what's funny is that I feel like you're healthy now. You were out of balance. And I think that
For
almost
sure.
all
Yeah, I was
top players
definitely.
are out of balance. So it's like I think you're healthier now, but then you look at the loss of fire and so okay, you're healthier now, but you probably had a more effective pool narrative when you were younger. So it's like
Yeah.
it's funny because I listen to you talk, I'm like, man, I'm happy for you that you're in a better spot in your life. But then you're looking wistfully back and be like, man, I used to be so hungry. You know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, so it's funny.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, well, it's because it's like you know how hungry you were at one point and
Yeah.
like how good that helped you play in a lot of moments and when you were tired it's like part of you kind of wants like tap back into that briefly, right? And like on command, it'd be nice to be able to get that for
Yeah,
4 weekends out of the year, but it just doesn't work that
but
way.
there's a reason why we're where we are is because we
Yeah,
know if I could go back and it's like the ghost of Christmas past. If I could go back and go down that other road, it would not have been a good road for me at all.
for
It's
sure.
just it wouldn't have been. Okay, so back to plateaus. So we were talking about limited resources as far as limited energy invested. The only thing about that is I think that you and I, and maybe I'm being wrong, maybe I'm wrong. So here, let me just try this. I'll say it out loud first, and then we'll see if it's right. I think a lot of people feel that way that, hey, I'm stuck where I'm at because I don't have more I can put into the game. And I think that that's somewhat true for me and you, but I also think that that's not true for most people. So the reason I feel like it's probably somewhat true for me and you is because me and you got to a level to where for us to shot take and for us to really stretch ourselves, we have to like it. We really have to go like week long out of state tournaments, and the expenses of time and money that it takes for us to get out of our comfort zones and to really push. And then the levels that you've reached, the levels I've reached, that to play and to try to get past that is very very difficult. It becomes like the higher level you get, it's very difficult, and it takes more and more resources to keep pushing for smaller and smaller growth, and it takes a lot. So it's almost like it's like if it was pay to play and you could buy levels. Level one costs you, if you're a beginner, you can level up in a half an hour. And then, to get to level two, it takes you 2 hours. And to get to level three, it takes you 10 hours. And then by the time you're at level 180, it takes you like 20,000 more hours and 5 years of full time play to level up. And it's a pretty
Yeah.
hard investment to make. So for me and you saying, hey, man, we're at a spot where it's hard for us to find the time and energy and resources to want to level up anymore. But then I think a lot of people feel that way when they're. So here's a question. Does that excuse, like from a if you heard that excuse from a guy who's 750, I'd be like, yeah, that makes sense to me. Is there a Fargo rate where if somebody said that to you, you'd look at him and be like, what do you mean you're plateaued because you don't have the opportunity to improve? Like when would you start kind of looking at him like, no, this is on you.
That's a good I
We got to
mean,
call some people out.
yeah. Well, I'm trying to think here. I've like when you first said that, I was thinking like, all right, like a guy like Dave, just because I just played with him today. Like, what is his Fargo? I should probably know that, but it's probably like around 620 range or
It's under
630.
650, but yeah,
I
he. I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't see
somewhere in there.
people's. I don't see people's Fargo rates. I don't see color.
Yeah, okay, yeah, but somewhere in there, yeah. So I would say probably it's got to be in the higher 600s where you start to like have a realistic. I mean, it might even be right around 700, honestly, where you're like you're running out of the ability to like improve, because there's only so much you can do. It might be a little different in different areas of the country, depending on, the population of those level players too. But I'm just thinking in our area here, like if you're, yeah, if you haven't like hit 700 or even 685, 690 range, then like there's things that you definitely can be doing that are very attainable here to bump up your Fargo. Obviously, the closer you get to that number, it's going to be harder. But yeah, I mean, if you're in like the low to mid 600s, then and you're saying that you can't, then no, it's just that you're just not. That's
So
what it
I
is.
was actually going to be a little bit more generous, but you know what? This is really good for most people to hear. So I am not that far away from you. My number, I I have a different view because I've worked with a lot of players, Jesse, that are in that 580 to 650 range. And I know these people. I know I'm not saying you don't know them, but like I know what they put in. I know how often they play. I know how they practice. I know how good they're playing, and I see how hard they work, and I see where they get, where they're at. And I'm like, yeah, it would take a serious commitment of time and energy. And so I think that the road between 650 and 700 is a pretty tough one. And so if a guy told me that, if a guy told me he was 650 and it was just hard for them to keep trying to make progress and the cost of doing it, especially if they were in an area where there weren't a lot of better players, and playing better players would involve, travel and expense that, is hard for them. I could see that. But I'll tell you what, man, and I have nothing but love. And I'm saying this out of love, not out of attacking. The truth might hurt, but like I think that if you're under 600 Fargo, or if you're under 620 Fargo, and you're talking about like, yeah, I know how to play, I know what I need to do, I just don't have the time and energy to put into it to get better. It's like I don't know, man. Like the leaks that and the stuff that the low hanging fruit is still there in your pool game to where it, listen, if there's like a if there's some single mom working three jobs and waiting tables till bar close every night, and literally working 7 days a week, and exhausted and falling passing out of the couch when she gets home so she can go do it again, okay, fair enough, she might not be able to get there. But like anybody that has time to listen to me talk on a podcast, if you have time to listen to 2 hours of me ranting, then you have time to get past 600 Fargo. It's the leaks are big, the pieces are there. It's not easy. It's not easy, but there's a lot of good league players between 550 and 600 Fargo that have been stuck for 10 years plus that think they're plateaued. And that's kind of why I coach, is because I'm looking at it, I'm like, no, you don't have to get stuck there. If you get stuck at 680 or even, even get to 650, I won't, like Jesse said, Jesse's number is 700 for me. It's like once you get past 650, I get that the road gets pretty hard, but like don't don't you can get well into the 600s before you really start having to make serious sacrifices in your life.
Yeah, and I will agree with you on like the when you say like the 650 to 700 jump, like it's definitely hard. I'm not gonna, especially in today's day and age where you don't get the access to play against much. No, I mean it.
It's
Like,
just funny that it's like really hard to avoid that topic with me. It's like
yeah, yeah. So,
it's like
but
everything we just keep going back to, like especially with so and so kicking us out of
yeah, so I
it.
don't want to make it seem as though like it's like laughable, like oh, if you're stopping at 650 and saying like oh it's so hard, like no, it's that's definitely a fine, or even 640 or 630, like it's understandable why it's maybe hard for you to jump from there. I just mean that if somebody did come and say they're like yeah, I like there's just no way that I can really get better with the time and the energy that I have, then I don't know, I would start to like slightly because I've played enough guys that are in that range. And I just see like I mean, I feel like their game could go up 20 to 30 points just by like tweaking their decision making, not even their
That's
execution,
Trust me, I get it,
just
brother.
their
I get it.
decision making, because yeah, they take high like low percentage shots and I mean you get it. You see it every day. So it's just that's where I just see like I'm like if you were like super diligent on this, you could fix this in a year. So anyways.
No, that's good. So then resources is one thing. One thing I was thinking about with plateau. So I'll try to introduce this idea and let you share your thoughts about it first. But the idea is it kind of comes back to shot taking, but it comes back to the bigger topic, which is comfort zone. I think that we were talking a lot about shot taking as a point of growth. That's why there's a lot of overlap. One reason people might plateau is because they get stuck in their comfort zone. And okay, you know what? Let me just share a couple thoughts about this, because I realized if I just said, "What do you think about that?" Like, it's kind of a vague statement. So here's some thoughts I have on this. There's a beginner's mindset when people think that they need to improve. One. This is really cool. So I'm sorry, I'm going two directions at once, but I wanted to put a pin in the last thing and tie it back together. We talked about resources and people thinking they didn't have enough time and energy to put in the pool. I've talked about it before. People make a series of faulty assumptions. The first thing that happens is there is a day. Here's why they get plateaued, Jesse. Is because someday in their pool career, they decided that they were a good pool player with a capital G good. So for a long time, they had a beginner's mindset. They thought, yeah, I'm still learning this game. I need to get better. I'm learning this game. I need to get better. And they're putting in their input and they're taking their shots and they're taking their losses. But along the way, they started having some success. They started beating some of the players that they used to lose to. They started running a table from the break. They started moving up to where they're one of the better players in their league. Maybe they won that tournament that had that they were allowed to play in, or whatever, that league tournament. And all of a sudden they have people telling them they're a good player, and they've watched a lot of videos, they know a lot, and all of a sudden they find themselves giving advice to other people on the team, and somewhere along the lines they decided, man, I'm a good player. And the day that they decided that they're a good player is the day that they really stopped growing. And if you were to ask these players all kind of would tell you the same thing, which is, I know how to play. I've seen the videos. I've read the books. I understand, how good pool should be played. I watch pool. I watch Matchroom. I watch all the top players, and I know what they're going to do before they do it. When they're at the table, I sit there and I look at it and I think about what I would do, and then they do it just like I think they should, and that's what I would have tried to do. The only difference is they just do it better than me, because I struggle to execute what I know. And I have a lot of knowledge about the game, and I play pretty well. And when I'm playing my best, I play really well, but I'm just not as consistent and I'm not as fundamentally strong as them. And I just don't have, I know what I would have to do to get better. I would just have to practice my fundamentals to become more consistent. The problem, I know how to play, but I'm just not consistent enough. And that comes from fundamentals. And I know how to fix it, which is work on my fundamentals until I'm more consistent so I can play the way I do sometimes and the way the pros always do. And if I could just do that more consistently, and I just don't have the time and energy to put into my fundamentals. And so half the people conclude I don't have the time. And then half the people try to put in that time, never get there. And then they conclude they just were cursed and they weren't given the talent. And that is the story that most people tell themselves is that I'm a good player. I know how to play. I just need to be more consistent. It's a problem with fundamentals, and I just don't have the time or talent to really fix that. But I know how to play. I know what to do. I just don't have time. And I think that story is the story that leads to them quitting. Quitting putting in more input, but B, quitting shot taking as well. And they quit shot taking for multiple reasons. One, to your point, if they don't see a way to get better, then why would they bother taking these losses if I don't have the time and energy to get where I want to go anyway? And then there's another reason they want to quit shot taking, which I'll get to in a minute. But my point was I was pitting that last topic, which was comfort zone. Sorry, I'm trying to keep it together. I know I went three different directions. Our
Okay, no
last
problem.
topic, our last topic was about shot taking, and I was explaining, or I was just explaining, why people plateau, and I was talking about why once they decide that they're good players, they stop shot taking, and they have a story that quits putting in input because they don't see the value in it because they conclude that they're good, and then that also leads them to where they're not in the beginner's mind, looking and humbly looking for new ways to improve their game because they already think they have the answers and they're wrong. So, but they're wrong. They don't have the answers, but they won't find them because they think they do. Okay, I didn't organize that as well as I could, but what are your thoughts on all of that crap?
Well, yeah, when you first said that, like once people kind of hit that like inner story, that's when they, stop doing like the shot taking. Like I would say that that's partially kind of like what would happen with me even, like and probably why I don't want to shot take to this day is I don't really see the path for me to improve, let alone like forget about like getting some output from the game, either financially or just like achievement wise. It is definitely hard to see like how I could jump up 30 Fargo points when I don't really have the resource to do it. So then yeah, it makes me not want to like, pop out and do that as much. But I don't know. I mean, again, I feel like that might be a little different for everybody, right? Because if we like I know if both you and I had a chance, even like every 2 months, let's say, right, where some new like clearly top player that was like 780 to 800 Fargo, if they came to town, like we would give them action. We just play them even sets. It might not be for a ton, but like I assume you still would. I for sure will. Like let's play. If we could play a few $100 sets, like no problem. But that's just because I kind of want to battle, and I kind of look at it as like, oh, I'm getting a discount. Like I don't have to,
You don't have to
pay
buy a
two
plane ticket
grand
to go play
and
that set.
spend a week to go do this. Like I'm like, all right. So and then I only got to beat one player, right? I don't have to beat eight
So,
to.
okay, so let me steer this a little bit. You were saying, so we keep making the mistake of talking about me and you, and we are truly in different spots than most people. But
Yeah.
for a 580 that were to tell you like, oh, I know how to play. I just can't always execute what I know. And I don't have the time to put in to really iron out my fundamentals the way I know they would need to be for me to be able to play the way I play when I'm playing well consistently. What would you say to that person?
Yeah, I mean, I would say like respectfully, like I can understand why you feel that way because you probably do have uh, a higher a higher rating like with your knowledge than you do with your physical game and the execution of it. But to say like to kind of hear like that sort of like mental give up stroke in that sense, that doesn't make a lot of sense to me because I mean you can definitely improve that. Like that's not something you can't fix. It's so much easier for them to fix that at that rating and see improvements than again I won't bring up us here, but I'm just saying
Yeah, yeah.
the higher you get up that scale, the harder it is to do.
Yeah, we
So
would dream of having those kinds of opportunities to improve in our games. Yeah.
yeah, and the fact that you see people every year in every local area, I guarantee you there's guys that go from 600 to the 650 rating. It's not a ton of them. The percentages or the amount of people that are going to do that is obviously going to be lower and lower the higher you go up the Fargo scale. But in the five, if you're saying a 580 came to me and said that, I mean, I would just have to have a realistic conversation with them. But if they just got to the point where they were so stuck in their head, they just told themselves that story and they refused to see it any other way, then I mean, there's not really much I could do to tell them at that point. But
Yeah, there's so here's my thought on that because I've seen this play out. It's like a chess game. You see the moves, the openings. It's like, oh, that's the Philidor defense. It's like you just know it all by name at this point. I've seen people's stories that they tell themselves, and we talked a little bit about narratives and stories last pod. I've got more I could say about that, but the stories we tell ourselves are why we plateau a lot of times. Like we talked about why the story you told yourself about how making further sacrifices wasn't worth it. I'm not. You are right. It's probably a beneficial story in your life, but it's not very effective for improving past 750.
terrible, yeah,
So
terrible.
so for most players, the story they tell themselves is the story I just said about how they're really good and how they already know everything. They just have trouble executing. It's a horrible story. So anybody that thinks that story, whenever you started telling yourself that story, my guess is you haven't seen significant improvement since. Now you might have worked on something because there's going to be somebody that can always argue with me about how they've improved their jump shot and they because they don't want to accept what I'm about to say. But here it is. Um, that story is not true. That everybody has a performance range. And some days you play good and some days you play bad. And whenever people play at the top of their performance range, it feels really good. And during that time, they feel like they're playing super awesome. And so then if they think that, well, that's how I play and that's what I'm capable of, and that proves that I know how to play. And then this whole thing about needing to be consistent, it's like, so their first wrong conclusion is, I know how to play. It's like, no, you don't. Then how come on your best day you don't run 200 in straight pool? How come on your best day you're not beating the 800s out of, the Derby City? It's like, why is that not your high water mark? If you're so goddamn
Yeah,
good and you know all the stuff that the pros know, and when you're playing good, you know you can actually do it. Now, how come you're not doing it on your good days? No, no, no. The fact is that they don't really, and I'm included. Like nobody, it's not you. It's nobody knows how to. Nobody's good at this game. Like to tell yourself I'm good at this game, like I know how to play. That statement right there turns off the learning, and now it's just a matter of I just now need to become better at what I already know and become more consistent what I already know. And the problem is consistency is a myth. I've talked about this in previous pods. Everybody has a performance range. Shane doesn't always play 850. Sometimes he plays 920. Sometimes he plays 780. So the goal is not to be consistent. The goal is to move our performance range up so that our high water marks are higher and our averages are average. And so therefore, but most people think they're good. They think they just need to be more consistent and work on their fundamentals. And that's why people go back to fundamentals again and again. So the problem with all this stuff is that once you buy into that story that I'm a good player, then when you go to the pool hall, you're trying to just you're trying to do things that reinforce that story. So playing better players that make you feel helpless and break you down is not fun because that doesn't jive with me being a good player. I'm a good player. I'm a good player, and I have a certain set of entitlements as a good player. I think I ought to be able to win, and I ought to be able to perform well, and I ought to not choke, and I ought to feel good at the table and feel confident because I'm a. So there's a story that says there are winners and losers. There's champions and there's chumps. Most people are chumps, but some people are champions, and those champions they just win all the time and they play great all the time and they're mentally impervious. And once somebody decides I am one of those champions and I'm a good player, they are not going to put themselves in situations where that narrative gets challenged by reality. So when they play better players and get wrecked, then all of a sudden it's like, well, that I don't feel so, that shatters my confidence in that story and it doesn't feel good. So I've said there's two ways to enjoy the game. You can enjoy the adversity, testing yourself against the adversity of the game, or you can enjoy patting yourself on the back about how awesome you are. And once people start telling themselves they're a good player, they shift from enjoying the adversity of the game to enjoying patting themselves on the back about how good they are. And when they're so busy I'm going to the pool hall because I just want to celebrate how awesome I am. That does not lead to shot taking and getting their teeth kicked in. They're not going to want to do that. So, two ways to enjoy the game: enjoy adversity or enjoy basking in your own imaginary ego reflection. And once you
yeah,
tell yourself you're a good player, you start getting addicted to ego and enjoying your own self-image and ego addiction. And then that is what leads people to making all those erroneous conclusions and avoiding getting out of their comfort zone. And those are the things that so anybody that thinks they're good, you can either be growing, or you could either tell yourself you're good, or you could grow. And the cost of telling yourself you're a good player is, I just think that's, you ask me why people plateau, and then that story leads to behavior and lack of input and lack of shot taking and lack of getting out of their comfort zone. So all those other, if we could have a 2 hour conversation about why do people plateau and why don't people shot take, but all of it I think stems from people shifting to ego enjoyment instead of adversity enjoyment.
Probably true. Yeah, it's probably true. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I know you don't want us to keep talking about us. It's just funny because like the more I hear this, I just think like, man, it would like to be in that position to be able allowed to shot take for such a small amount of either money for a tournament or just like matching up with people, and knowing that you have an nearly like unlimited supply of it. It's kind of crazy to think you could have that and then just choose not to do it because you just you want to get better, but not through the process that it takes to get better. It's it is kind of mind-boggling. If you're a serious pool player, it doesn't make any sense to me.
And that's why you're the best player around. You know what I mean? That's like that's
Yeah.
why you have
Well, for
that's
sure.
why you're
That's what you
kicked out,
said.
Jesse. The
Yeah.
problem is the problem is anybody listening should probably tune this out. Otherwise, just disregard. Otherwise, you're going to get kicked out of your pool scene here in about 2 years. But honestly, it is really a good example because Jesse and I are different people. But you could say that I'm friends with Jesse because I found somebody that thinks similar to me in a lot of things. But another way you could say it is like it just so happens that if you look at what I'm trying to say is if you look at the top players in all the area, there somebody could make the case. Well, of course they're all going to say shot taking is good because all the top players want to get paid. It's like or that is the mindset that leads to becoming a top player in your area. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's like these are the mindsets. So for people with different mindsets, man, I'm just trying to highlight, Jesse and I are both pretty passionate about shot taking. We're both pretty passionate about kind of like we're not, like I don't think of myself as a good player with a capital G. I understand where I stand in the world because I do shot take and I do get out of my comfort zone and I know exactly. I mean, I could play you. I could go to, I'm going to Derby in a couple of weeks. And like, trust me, I, every time I practice, it's I know like everything I do is never enough. It's never perfect. It's never good enough. And I know where it breaks down against better players. And I know that I'm going to be running it again here in a few weeks. And it's like I have a sense of urgency. It's never enough. And at no point do I invite people over to my house and just you know beat up on them because I'm a better player. Just sit there and pat myself in the back. I got no time for that because I know that there's work to do and it's going to take everything I've got to just give it my best, and I'm still up against it. So like, I don't
Yeah.
think of myself as a good player with a capital G. I know I'm a devoted lifelong pool player that has developed a fairly competent pool game, but like, I didn't get it. I didn't get a Fargo badge where I just get to strut around and win matches because I'm awesome. Like even last night, I was playing a session and I was playing rough the first 3 sets, and I'm telling you, I felt like I was getting on the balls. I didn't feel comfortable. And I was trying to figure out, like, is this a physical thing or a mental thing? Like, is it physical or mental? Because some days I feel so crisp and accurate. And other days I don't. I'm like, is this physical or mental? Like, what is it? And I'm like, well, I've been trying to like sort it out physically, like trying to figure out like how to, what am I doing wrong? And I'm like, maybe it's mental. Let me try this another way. And I decided, we played it one more set. I'm like, I decided I'm going to find out if it's mental because I am going to work harder this set than I've ever worked in any set in my entire life. I am going to work harder this set. I'm every single shot. I'm going to treat like it's a hill nine ball. I'm going to fight for every inch of that cue ball. I'm going to try to bait the ball in the center of the pocket on every shot. I am ready to make this the hardest I've ever worked. And I got up and I started lasering into the contact point and I grounded the first shot and I grounded anyway. I ended up like running, not 5 racks in a row, but like kind of, you know what I mean? It was like five, it was like, 10 ball race to 5, whatever, but it was like 5 racks and it was like, boom. And I'm like, well, I guess that settles it. It was like, I just wasn't working hard enough. Now, the funny part is through that effort, it did change something I was doing physically. And what I realized is something you told me about staring at the contact point on the way down. I realized I'd been kind of plopping down a little loosey goosey. Like I'd look at the contact point and I kind of plop down and kind of take my eye off the contact point, and I was getting down a little off. And so even though I was physically off, what changed being physically off wasn't me figuring that out and fixing it physically. It was really dialing in my effort. And then through dialing in the effort, my eyes got bigger and I started really looking at the contact point. Time slowed down a little bit. And then all of a sudden, all those physical things sorted themselves out. And
Yeah.
so my point of all that is that type of performance came from a lot of effort. And that effort came not from me telling myself how good I am, but on the other hand, saying, I'm not good enough to just show up and win. Like I have to earn it. And you can't, like we've talked about entitlement being the cause of slumps and bad days. And yeah.
Yeah,
So,
it's
so thinking you're a good player leads to entitlement. And we've talked about how we had a podcast on what causes bad days, and you said entitlement, and there it is. As soon as you
yep.
think you're a good player, you not only do you slump, but now we've talked about how it causes you to plateau.
Well, yeah, and the one thing that happens with that too is you when you're playing good and you're kind of climbing up, you don't even realize like actually how good of a job you are doing at focusing and keeping, in your routine until you start to hit that like you said, you kind of hit that like ego spot. And then that's when you start questioning, or you, like you said, you get down and you're like, well, I'm a little bit off. How did I get a little bit off? It's because you never really, were telling yourself, hey, stare at the contact point as I'm getting down. You just naturally went through it because every shot meant so much to you.
When
So
you were in the mindset that you had to give 100% to have a chance because you don't know if you can do it, you bear down. And then once you're like, well,
yeah,
I'm the man and I'm supposed to just win, that doesn't lead to the same type of effort and focus. And then that manifests physically. And there's a saying where I come from in sales. How do you get a salesperson to stop doing something? You show them that it works. Just show them that it works, because then they'll be successful and then they'll be like, oh, that's cool. I wonder if I can cut some corners and still get it done. It's like as soon as they
right.
find the winning way, they want to start kind of cut corners and how much less can I do and still get away with it? And so it's kind of a cynical saying, but it's like the bottom line is that you know, people are, human nature, we're by nature, we're lazy and egotistical. And this overlaps too with our last pod about narratives and stories. I've really thought a lot about it. I teach mental game, of course. I think a lot about this stuff. It's almost like my life purpose is to reflect and muse on these topics. And the stories we tell ourselves, man, are really, really. I even went as far as to say, like really, when you boil it down, we're nobodies doing nothing, and for no reason. Like we are stardust, one of 8 billion people on a planet that are here in a flash, and we'll be gone in a week. And anybody that's listening to this podcast that has like a terminal disease that has 2 days left to live, they're thinking about what they're going to do with their last hours, and we're running around talking about this stuff like it matters. And it's like it doesn't. Okay, we're here for a flash. We're nobody. We're here for a flash. What we do, it's like, obviously, I'm not nihilistic. I'm not saying life has no purpose. But what I'm saying is, it is insignificant compared to what our ego wants to believe. And so our ego plays a purpose, which is we have to assign importance to our lives. Because if we don't assign importance to our lives, then, I think there was a great quote about like the ego is what, without the ego, I wouldn't know if I was putting a fork full of food in my mouth or somebody else's mouth. I need the ego to prioritize me so that I take care of my own, human existence. There's a purpose for assigning myself importance in my mind, which is nobody else is going to assign me importance. So I have to prioritize myself because it's kind of my job to take care of myself. But beyond that, so there's some valuable stuff that the ego does. But most, at the end of the day, it's like there's think about somebody like a think about a 25-year-old that you don't know his name, and he's in North Carolina, and he's in a pool hall. Some stranger in a pool hall. You don't know what pool hall. You don't know who he is. You've never met him. But there's a 25-year-old playing pool tonight in a pool hall in North Carolina. What's he to you? He's nobody to you. He's doing nothing. Is what he's doing important? Not to you, it isn't. Well, that's who we are. Is we're just a nobody doing nothing important. And anything beyond that is a story that we're telling ourselves. Anything beyond that, we're just somebody doing something, hitting pool balls, is we start telling ourselves all these fantastical stories. And some of them are very effective for improvement, and a lot of them are very destructive. but they are alluring because they're not effective for improving your effectiveness at taking on adversity, but they can be fun to tell ourselves in terms of
Yeah.
basking in our own satisfaction. And so, what I would say is a lot of what I teach with mental game is becoming increasingly aware of the stories that we're telling ourselves and how they are and aren't working for us. And then the stories that are sabotaging our performance, learning how to see through them, peel them apart, and let them go a little bit. That's kind of what I teach. And so, anyway, it's just interesting how everything overlaps because we talked about entitlement causing slumps. We've talked about not wanting to shot take. We've talked last podcast. We talked a lot about narratives and stories, and now I'm looking at how the story of how we're good could shift us into a ego basking mindset as opposed to an adversity thrilling mindset, and how quickly that changes our output and our behavior and leads to. So yeah, I could talk about all the reasons people plateau and they don't learn new stuff and they don't play better players and they don't really believe they can get anywhere and they're not really disciplined and they just want to practice what they already know. But I think a lot of it comes from the stories they tell. So anyway, I'm kind of starting to circle, but yeah, that's thanks for listening.
Yeah, no, makes sense.
So it's
Yeah.
and
Go
that's
ahead.
and the funny part too is it all comes full circle because then one of the reasons shot taking is so useful is that when you shot take and the guy just tears you apart, it kind of helps defeat that story that you had about how good you were and how you
That
already
is
have it
true.
all figured out. So it helps you tear that apart and get back to. And I did that competitor cycle video. It's on Little Chris competitor cycle. Look it up if you're interested. And it talks about the beginner's mind and then the cycle we go through with the ego. And anyway, loss is I always say loss is humiliating, but humiliation is not a bad thing. Humiliation is just the death of the ego. And it leads you back to humility, which is an egoless existence, which is I am not something special. I am like literally humility means I understand that I'm not all that. And so when the ego gets involved, then humiliation is needed to get back to humility. And loss is so shot taking serves the purpose of humbling the ego and getting us back to the beginner's mindset. It plays a role, but the ego knows that, and so the ego wants to preserve itself, and so it wants to come up with a million reasons why we don't need to shot take because it really just doesn't want to let go yet of that illusion of how good we are. I don't know, man. These are just random thoughts I'm having now.
No, it's dead on, I think. I've definitely struggled with that in recent years, because it's
Yeah,
hard to want to, yeah, it's a tough process, man. You've been through
and
enough time, but
yeah,
it's
and
hard.
the better you get at this game, like obviously, the better you get at this game, the more temptations there are to gaze in the mirror and pat yourself on the back. Yeah.
For sure.
Especially when you start having a podcast with like 20 people listening. It's
Oh
like,
yeah,
I'm telling you, it's pretty
you kind
hard.
of made it.
Sometimes, I go to the gas station, they're like, oh, do you have rewards with us? And I'm like, no, but I have a podcast with,
Yeah,
have you ever tuned into? Okay.
it's funny. Yeah, I don't know. You got any other small topics or
Oh man, I think people are praying for me to say no. So I
okay.
will, I'm good, man. But do you have anything else you want to, did that satisfy you with your
Yeah, I
prayer
mean,
to
no,
talk
it's
about those topics?
yeah. I mean, I'm sure like you and I could talk about stuff for hours, so we're not gonna like kind of just continue to repeat things in a different way. But I think we covered
Too
most of it,
late.
to be honest. Yeah, too late. Yeah, no, I think we covered most of it. I mean, people can hear that and they get a pretty good idea of what where we stand on it, what we think is the correct way to approach it, and probably. Yeah, we probably get a lot of people to. I mean, you're the one that kind of gets the feedback. I feel like when you get the emails, when they come in. So
Yeah.
I feel like we probably open people's eyes to up to a lot of different point of views when we
On
do
the
these.
Little Chris stream, Mike Fields put a comment in the chat and he said he wanted to pass on thanks to you as well. He always was excited when you joined. So thank you,
Okay,
Jesse.
well,
So,
you're
yeah,
welcome, Mike Fields.
yes.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in. If you have questions that you'd like me to answer, concisely in 2 hours or more, email info at
If you have
mnpoolbootcamp.com.
nothing going on for about the next week and you want to hear an answer to that,
Jeepers,
people
jeepers.
people got to use their PTO to listen to you answer a question. This is getting intense.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. So, all right.
All right.
Cool,
Well,
Jesse. Thanks, man.
till next time, man. Yep.
All right. Talk to you soon.